The Omar Broadway Story. Newark, New Jersey, May 4th, 1999. The record begins on the streets of East Orange. Omar Broadway is 18 years old. In this specific urban geography, Broadway is an established narcotics dealer, a role that provides him with local status and a predetermined criminal trajectory. On this evening, however, Broadway finds himself in a bind and targets a taxi driver. He is armed with a sawed-off shotgun. He executes a carjacking and an armed robbery. He then proceeds to ride around and pick up fares and then rob them as well. Broadway had an open case and was out on bail. He showed up to court and was arrested. Records show that upon his arrest he had $10,000 on him. The judicial response is definitive. Broadway is apprehended by Newark authorities, processed through the New Jersey court system, and convicted of armed robbery and weapons possession. The court hands down a 10-year sentence in the New Jersey State Prison System. He is remanded to Northern State Prison in Newark. Due to his active street affiliations and profile, he is classified for the Security Threat Group Management Unit, the STGMU. This is the gang unit. It is a high-security isolation wing designed as a prison within a prison. The architecture is a concrete void. Broadway describes a state of vicious intimacy between the correctional officers and the captive. It is a 23-hour-a-day lockdown. The auditory environment is a sensory vacuum. Remote echoes of shouting, the mechanical slam of steel sliders, and the rhythmic thud of men shadowboxing in 8 by 10 foot cells to stave off cognitive collapse. This is the environment Omar Broadway decides to put on film. Northern State Prison, 2004. The documentation begins with a total breach of institutional security. Broadway acquires a Panasonic PV-GS12 video camera. The hardware enters the tier through a network of sympathetic correctional officers. These officers operate under the collective pseudonym Walter to mask their individual identities and prevent internal affairs tracking. The camera is a high-stakes liability. To prevent its seizure during daily shakedowns and tactical cell searches, Broadway manages a complex relay system. The camera is never stationary. It is fished between cells using lines made from torn bed sheets. It is passed through plumbing gaps and food slots. It is stored inside the physical infrastructure of the unit, behind wall panels and within ventilation ducts. Broadway would use the camera to film the misdeeds of the correction staff. Broadway would tell fellow inmates to not lock in, knowing what the response would be. The Northern State Goon Squad would arrive and restore order by beating the inmates into submission. The violence by the staff was excessive and cruel. Simultaneously, Broadway operates a contraband cellular phone. He bypasses state-monitored lines to engage in cold call outreach to the outside world. He targets high-profile media and cultural figures: Oprah Winfrey, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, the rapper 50 Cent. His objective is a media trade, the raw footage of the STGMU in exchange for legal intervention or a global public platform. Every attempt is met with non-response. The tapes remain buried inside the walls. Broadway films through a 4-inch aperture in his steel cell door. The lens is unstable. The lighting is minimal. The audio is distorted by the acoustics of the concrete tier. Despite these technical constraints, he captures the ghastly rituals of Northern State. The record of force, tactical extractions, Broadway captures five-man teams in full riot gear. In one sequence, a restrained inmate is dragged down a concrete staircase by his ankles. His cranium impacts every step. Chemical deterrence. The footage documents the routine application of pepper spray in cells with non-functioning ventilation. The countermeasure. Inmates are recorded wrapping their torsos and limbs in plastic trash bags. This is a survival tactic used to prevent the oily chemical spray from adhering to the skin and causing prolonged deep tissue chemical burns. The camera documents the total collapse of the facility's infrastructure. Chronic sewage overflows in the restorative housing units. Structural vandalism, a complete lack of airflow. Parallel government documents from the New Jersey legislature later confirm these specific habitability failures, validating Broadway's visual record of institutional rot and systemic neglect. The digital tapes are extracted from Northern State by the Walter Network. They are delivered to Broadway's mother, Lynn Broadway, in East Orange. Lynn Broadway initiates a grassroots distribution effort. She burns the raw footage to DVD-R discs. She walks the street corners of Newark and East Orange, selling the discs for $5 each. She sells a total of 32 copies. One copy is eventually acquired by a local news affiliate. They broadcast a short segment, but it fails to generate the public outcry or policy reform Broadway anticipated. The project changes trajectory when director Douglas Tirola acquires the tapes. He produces the 2008 feature-length documentary, an Omar Broadway film. The film blends the raw prison footage with the study of the Newark ecosystem. It features FaceTime with Newark gang leaders and community members. Interviews with Lynn Broadway reveal a complex family dynamic. She expresses vocal pride in Omar's status as a drug dealer and his gang affiliations. The documentary concludes that the streets of East Orange and the STGMU are an eternally linked cycle, where incarceration is a systemic expectation for the neighborhood's youth. January 2011. Omar Broadway is 30 years old. He is released from Maryland's Eastern Correctional Institution after serving a decade-long sentence plus an additional 13 months for contraband discovered in 2009. He returns to the Newark area. For 6 years, he exists outside the walls he spent his youth documenting. May 4th, 2017. Newark. The cycle of violence resurfaces. 18-year-old Najee Broadway is shot and killed. The victim is Omar's nephew. Following an investigation by the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, the primary suspect identified is Omar Broadway. The manhunt. A federal and local search begins. For over a month, Broadway is a fugitive. On June 9, 2017, the search converges on a residence in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Local detectives and FBI agents establish a perimeter. They move to execute the arrest warrant. The basement. As authorities close in on the building, Broadway retreats to the basement. There is no negotiation. There is no second film. Broadway made a promise to himself that before he was returned to prison, H would rather die. Before he can be taken into custody, Omar Broadway takes his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He is pronounced dead at the scene. He is 35 years old. The aftermath. The footage Broadway smuggled out of Northern State remains the only raw, uncensored record of the STGMU gang unit during that era. His documentation of sewage spills, broken ventilation, and institutional violence eventually forced a change in the law. The New Jersey legislature passed mandatory habitability standards for all state prisons, validating the conditions Broadway filmed through his cell door 13 years prior. The man is dead. The record of what he saw will live forever.